Welcome to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera, Part 7, Chapter 25, A Friendly Fight. I missed something, but Thaniel couldn't figure out what she could have missed. Arjanil looked stunned, like someone hit the back of his head with a board. Meanwhile, Azariah stared at him like he wished he could read his mind. Well, that was weird. Thaniel slid out of Intali's grasp. They'd have to sort out their feelings after they dealt with the army their ship raced toward. What are you doing right now, Guerren? Did you win over that army of demons, fallen angels, and ex-gods? I hope not, because I wanted to watch that struggle. Thaniel grinned as the wind blew her hair back from her face. Why should he have all the fun? I could raise my own army to fight the one attacking the gates. Where were those guardian angels that wanted to help save Arjanil back when she thought he needed saving? Were they still close by? Would they come if I called them? She needed to find out. I can't wait to see Guerren's face when I show up with an army at my back. I'll be right back. Thaniel waved to her companions.
Where are you going?
Natalie asked. To rally some bored angels. Why should we have all the fun? Danielle winked at Natalie, then flew off, leaving Arjanil and Azariah behind. Natalie would snap them out of their staring contest and get them battle ready. And the Versati didn't need any help with that, but heaven could use some more defenders, so Thaniel flew the remaining distance to the gates, and no dragon stopped her. That was weird. Where did all the dragons go? They usually hung around the bay, but Thaniel didn't spot a single scale or claw. Did someone recall them? That was possible, but who had that power, and where would they deploy the dragons? Thaniel considered options as she flew over the gates. Lightning bolts, fireballs, ice knives, acid balls, and all kinds of ranged magical attacks struck the gates, but they stayed standing. Usually they were lacy affairs, meant more for show than defense, so the skinnier attackers squeezed through the gaps and swam for shore, while the remaining attackers tried to break through the gates or widen one of the decorative gaps. Meanwhile, some attackers climbed up the gates since they offered plenty of hand and footholds because of its many swoops and whirls. Thankfully, none of the fallen angels, or demons, or ex-gods could fly, so they were stuck trying to climb over the gates or break through them. That bought her a little time to rally the angels, except rallying angels was a job for a herald, not a warrior like her. Where was a herald when you needed one? Thaniel flew over the bay that was sheltered behind the gates, the beach, and the violet crystal spires of Eversong, the lowest level of heaven, more commonly known as the Dead City by mortals for some reason. Thaniel landed on the roof of a building next to a gong she didn't remember seeing the last time she visited the city. Then again, she only came to the city when the Council of Angels ordered her to, so she didn't have any time for sightseeing then. Maybe the gong was new. I might as well hit it since it's here. Maybe it'll summon a herald for me. Thaniel shrugged as she picked up the mallet, then struck the gong. A pleasing sound reverberated out from it as she considered hitting it again.
What are you doing?
An angel demanded, as he pushed up a trapdoor a few feet away from where she stood. His violet hair exited first, followed by his scowling face. But he had a trumpet slung across his back, so she ignored his attitude since she found a herald at last. Oh good, I need you to announce there's an attack in progress on the gates of heaven. Summon the warrior angels, especially the bored ones. This is not an all-hands-on-deck situation, so fighters only, please. Tell everybody else to stay at their posts. Daniel handed him the mallet.
You're joking. There's no attack on the gates. Who would do that, and how would they get here?
The scowling angel followed her to the edge of the roof, so she pointed at the gates as a lightning bolt struck it. Any other questions? Daniel watched as his expression changed from surprise to outrage.
No, I've seen enough.
The herald unslung his trumpet, and it was about as long as a sword. Daniel stepped back off the roof and flapped her wings. Then you'll rally the warrior angels. I just need the ones ready to rumble. Everyone else can keep doing whatever they're doing.
I'm on it. You'll have some backup soon.
The herald angel ran toward the opposite side of the roof and played a rallying call on his trumpet as he leaped off it. His wings snapped out mid-song and propelled him over the city as other trumpets picked up the call to arms and echoed it. Daniel whistled in appreciation. Now that was the kind of song she could fly into battle while humming. So she spun and flew back to the gates. It's hammering time. Daniel grinned as her hammer appeared in her hands. Now she just needed to decide where to stand her ground. Except there was really only one place that called her. The gates sloped upward and came to a point at the center, and that's where Thaniel landed. Where the two gates met, there were carvings and all kinds of decorative bits that symbolized stuff, and that gave the climbers plenty of hand and footholds until she swung her hammer and knocked the topmost ones off the gates. This is so satisfying. Thaniel struck a fallen angel with a distended, drooling jaw, but he grabbed hold of her ankle before she whacked him, and he hung while she shook her foot. Unlike him, she still had wings, so she didn't need to balance on top of the gates unless she wanted to for the fun of it. The fallen angel screamed as a sword cleaved him in half, but he reformed before he hit the waves below because he was just a spirit full of anger and darkness, and one couldn't destroy a spirit that way. It was too bad. Thaniel shrugged and glanced at the angel, who cut him in half. Hey, Miss Rhea, I didn't know you were back in heaven. Miss Rhea shook her head of wavy dark hair. She wore her armor, of course, because Miss Rhea never wore anything else. At least, not that Thaniel had ever seen.
Why are you standing on top of the gates? This is more effective.
Miss Rhea slammed her sword into the sheath belted around her waist, and then she clamped both legs together and dropped like a stone. Demons, fallen angels, and ex-gods flew off the gates as she struck them. You're right, that is more effective, but it's not as much fun. Finiel sent her hammer away as someone screamed. Who screamed? She spun on her heel as Miss Rhea flew back to the top.
Someone's in trouble on shore. Come on.
Miss Rhea caught her arm and yanked Thaniel off the gates. How come you're here? I thought you were doing that guardian angel thing and guarding a soul in the mortal world. Thaniel flew alongside her friend as she waited for a reply. Miss Rhea must have finished that tour of duty if she was back in heaven. But the warrior angel didn't answer right away, since she was busy impersonating an arrow in flight. Miss Rhea could get maddeningly single-minded about things.
I felt a disturbance and thought I should check it out,
Miss Rhea said as she scanned the beach for the person who screamed. A bright flash pulled their attention to a white-robed power surrounded by fallen angels. What happens to your mortal while you're here? Thaniel landed on the beach beside Miss Rhea. It was head-cracking time, and that was an activity best shared with a good friend.
He'll be fine. Another angel is looking after him.
Miss Rita drew her sword and slashed at the fallen angel who held the power's arms behind her back. Can you leave your mortal with another angel? I thought you're supposed to guard them all the time. That was too much contact with mortals for Thaniel's liking, so she'd avoided every call for guardian angels ever issued, and she planned to keep avoiding that until there were no more mortals to guard. But she didn't admit that as she recalled her hammer and slammed its business end down on a fallen angel's back. He didn't expect that, so she smashed him into the sand like a spiritual pancake. Then she flung him into the sea.
I don't have to watch him all the time. Guardian angels can spell each other.
Miss Rhea picked up the fallen angel she slashed in half and threw both halves into the sea. But will another angel protect your mortal if their mortal is in danger too? That sounded risky to Thaniel. But if you couldn't trust your fellow angel, then who could you trust? She didn't have time to ponder that since a lightning bolt struck her arm. Oh goody, the ex-gods were here. She turned to meet the lightning wielder in battle.
Since the angel in question is his sister, she's heavily invested in his survival. Plus, the angels who guard his brother and his son are there too. If there's something she can't handle, then they can take it on. I have faith in them.
Miss Rhea let the other fallen angels run down the beach toward where they threw their fellows, so she could take on the three ex-gods striding toward them. The fallen probably couldn't access their angelic gifts here since they were banished, but the ex-gods didn't have that limitation. They wouldn't go down as easily. Good, I needed a workout. Thaniel sent her hammer away and called for her war axe instead. It sounds like your mortal's in trouble. Miss Rhea laughed, but she stuck with her sword, even though she had as many weapons as Thaniel in her arsenal.
He's always in trouble. That's why I picked him. I knew I'd never be bored.
But you're here, so you must be bored. Thaniel swung her offhand up to let the next lightning bolt strike her gauntlet. But Miss Rhea summoned an oblong shield that was long enough to cover them both, and she swung it up to block the bolt. It bounced harmlessly off her shield.
No, things were just getting interesting, but his sister can handle it. She'll keep my mortal breathing. I have faith in her.
Miss Rhea lowered the shield, then raised it when a fireball sailed toward them. How can your mortal have an angel for a sister? They changed the rules to allow the ascended souls to become angels, but this girl can't be one of them if she's still got living relatives. That kind of spiritual change takes lifetimes. The girl willed her axe to shrink and duplicate itself so she could pull an ancient from the one in her hand and throw it at Miss Rhea so she could pull a copy from the one in her hand and throw it at Miss Rhea. She threw her axe at the window. The axe struck the ex-god with the long, flowing white hair in between his eyes, and he fell backward. But he wouldn't stay down for long. We need to drive them away from heaven, somehow. Where are those dragons? They could do the job.
That's a long story. But she's the angel of death now. That's why I know she can handle it. So how did all these people get here? Last time I checked, they were all stuck in hell.
Miss Rhea lowered her shield, but she kept it in front of her, and she rested the flat of her sword on its top edge as she advanced. They took a boat. Thaniel advanced with her, as 5 demons shambled out of the sea to join the 2 remaining ex-gods. Were they affected by the ban? She probably had a shield somewhere in that invisible storage space where she kept all her weapons and armor, but she hardly ever used it outside of drills. After all, she was an archangel now, and hard to hurt.
No, seriously, how did they get here?
Miss Rhea summoned her helm, even though she didn't need it, then charged. She wasn't wearing a physical body, so a headshot might stun her, but not for long. They took a boat from the gray between. I'm not making that up. That's what really happened. Thaniel dodged a fireball by ducking behind Miss Rhea and her giant shield that stood almost as tall as she did.
I feel like we're talking in circles. How did they get to the gray between?
Miss Rhea stopped and turned when their attackers dodged to either side. Ooh, that. Someone built a gateway from hell to the gray between, and they walked through it. So did I, because it was there, so why not? It was a new experience. I'm not sure I'd repeat it, though. Thaniel split off another axe from the one in her right hand, and she threw it. But the ex-god, with seaweed for hair, jumped aside. Oh well, she had more where that came from.
That's not possible.
Miss Rhea spun to face her. Why not? Thaniel tried to go around her, but Miss Rhea tossed her shield aside and it vanished. Did she forget about the fight in progress?
Do you remember Malachiah? He created a portal from the gray between to hell. But my mortal sister, the one that became the angel of death, well, she and the ex-god of the future took that gateway down before the demons came through. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Miss Rhea stepped in close enough to grab her by her upper arms and shake her. I saw him complete the gateway. Daniel recalled those ghostly people attacking the gateway. I imagined that out of boredom. Miss Rhea was wrong about her angel friend and this ex-god taking down the gateway.
And I'm telling you, my friends took it down. No one crossed through it.
Miss Rhea shook her to make her point. But I saw a lot of creatures pass through it. Can we discuss this later? We're kind of in the middle of something. Daniel tried to pull her arms free, but Miss Rhea wouldn't let go. Nor did she answer her question either.
You damned right we're in the middle of something, and that something is very wrong.
Miss Rhea shot upward, yanking Thaniel up with her into the blue sky, then threw it until the blue faded to a spangled black. What are you talking about? Oh my God! What are those things? Thaniel stared at the giant glowing white ropes twisting in the darkness between the stars as they shot toward a pale blue dot in the distance.
That blue dot is the mortal world.
Miss Rhea let go so she could point at it.
It was good fighting alongside you again, but I need to go back there.
What are you going to do? Thaniel hadn't felt this far out of her depth since the Council of Angels sent her to the Gray Between to investigate the disturbances that turned out to be the gateways that started this whole mess.
I don't know, but I need to do something. I can't stand by and do nothing. You know that.
Miss Rhea floated toward that pale blue dot. Yeah, I'm the same way. But heaven tugged at Thaniel. She needed to get back down there and send the invaders back to hell somehow. Kick some butts for me.
You do the same.
Miss Rhea saluted her, then sped toward the mortal world. It was longer to travel this way, but Miss Rhea always preferred it. She was a weird angel and a good friend. Thaniel watched her friend shrink as the distance between them grew, but there was only one way what Miss Rhea claimed happened could be just as true as what Thaniel saw with her own eyes. Someone screwed up the timeline. On one branch, Miss Rhea's friends collapsed the gateway before anyone could use it to escape hell. On another branch, no one took down the gateway, so the adversary could send his goons through it. How did the adversary split time like that? He must have had help. Who could have helped him? We need to chase his minions back to hell and find out. Thaniel quit hovering and dropped through the black of the space between stars into the blue sky of heaven.
Chapter 26, Merging Timelines. Istiana! Faye called her sister's name as she ran through the benighted fog that just kept multiplying, so it could make this harder than it needed to be. I really hate those memory eaters. They take their job way too seriously. How could her sister go far when she was fading away? Thankfully, the whole fading thing was taking its sweet time and thus buying her time to save her sister. Istiana? Where are you? Faye windmilled her arms through the fog to disrupt it, but she still couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction, and the fog banks grew every second she spent there. Soon they'd cover her, too. This isn't funny. If you don't reduce this damn fog right now, I'll reduce it for you. Faye let the dragon out, and she snarled more threats at the hidden memory eaters.
Mom?
Phaedra shouted from somewhere in the fog. What's my son doing here? Faye cupped her hands and ignored the claws sprouting out of her fingertips. The claws were a pretty shade of metallic red, and they made her look as fierce as she felt. A fireball appeared on her palm, and she stretched it like dough. It's a good thing my kids are all fireproof, but this fog wasn't. Faye blasted the fog and carved out a 12-foot space around her that was fog-free.
Mom, next time, warn me before you do that.
Fedre stomped out of the fog as he beat out the flames in his frizzy black hair. Why? You can't burn. Faye tossed the fireball in her hands behind her so it could burn away more of the fog.
But my hair can.
Fedre glowered as he beat out the last of the flames, giving her a good view of the strange tunic he wore. That's true. Why does your tunic say, I went to the library of forbidden knowledge in hell and all I got was this shirt and a book? Faye tapped her foot as she waited for a reply.
Relax, Mom. It's just a tunic. Everyone's wearing it in the future. It's for the launch of something called the Rogue Gods Trilogy, and I guess it has a library in hell in it. But I just bought it because it looks cool.
Fedre ran a hand down the tunic and its message. Did you go to hell? I specifically forbade that after the last time you and your sister went there. Faye stopped as a ghostly copy of herself ran straight toward her. That's impossible. There's only one copy of me. I don't have alternative futures. I just stand as witness to everyone else's futures.
No, you said not to go there ever again, and I listened. The first time was bad enough. Mom, are you okay?
No matter how hard Faye stared at the woman who looked exactly like her down to the red dragon scale armor cladding her, the woman didn't fade away. She reached for Faye, and Faye just stood there, rooted to the spot. Her mind spun around in circles. This was impossible, but it was happening. It's some kind of trick, but I can see through illusions. No one can cast one strong enough to fool me.
Mom, what's happening? Why are there two copies of you?
Fedra backed away. I don't know. Faye conjured two fireballs, but they'd do no good if that woman really was her, because she was fireproof. Light strobed in her peripheral vision as the woman stopped. Let's not make this any more awkward than it needs to be, said her double. Someone split the timeline and caused this. The woman gestured between them. So, someone else fixed the timeline? Is that what you're saying? Faye narrowed her eyes and wished she had some kind of truth sense or the ability to read minds. That would be so useful right now. Maybe she didn't need that, since Rosalie had insisted something happened to the timeline, and she saw Pristina's plans firsthand. I still can't believe she wanted to destroy everything and everyone, including my family. The dragon in her soul rose at the thought of that and snarled under the surface. I wonder where ex-gods go when they die. Would Pristina wander through the gray between until Judgment Day? I don't know. I can only see the future, not the past. I don't know what shape the timeline is in. You know that. Her double shrugged, but her words broke Faye out of her thoughts and brought her back to the conversation at hand. Faye knew that, since that was her limitation. So, you're saying someone did something that caused the two timelines to collapse? That's my theory. Since there can't be two versions of us, you know what we need to do. Her double extended her hand, and it was empty. No weapons, no fireballs, no claws. Just a small black hand that didn't even shake. It makes sense, given all I've seen. Faye took the hand offered to her, and she faded until she was like a ghost. Because she was the copy, and the other woman was now the true version of them, Faye stepped forward and hugged herself. As they merged, she saw the real Faye take down a gateway with a dark-haired girl wearing angel robes. Then everything turned gray as she became that woman.
Mom, are you okay?
Fedra shook her shoulder. Faye opened her eyes and rubbed her forehead as she sat up and glowered at the gray fog creeping toward her. Hopefully, she didn't just get gray sand in her armor. What just happened, and why are you wearing that tunic?
I'm supporting the book launch.
Fedre sat back on his heels and rested his chin on the soft black trousers covering his knees. It says you got a book and this tunic. Did you actually buy a set of books and bring them back from the future? Faye all but snarled. How many times do I need to lecture him about taking things from the future back to the present? It was one of the most dangerous things a time walker could do. Even the smallest object could create a ripple in time, and those ripples were damnably hard to fix.
Sort of. I left when the earth started shaking and the books and the tunic came with me. But I didn't touch them. I returned home to my place in time and they just appeared, like they hitched a ride with me. At that point, I figured I was meant to have them.
Phaedra shrugged. Where are they now? Faye shot to her feet and wobbled until she caught her balance.
I left them at home. Phaedon probably took them by now. You know how much he likes to read. But they're fantasy books. There's nothing in them that could affect the future or harm anyone. They're just stories.
Federe rose too and kicked the gray sand. Are you sure about that? Faye wanted to believe him, but objects didn't time travel on their own.
Yes, but I didn't seek you out so you could grill me about my clothes and taste in books. I came because there are weird lights in the sky. But after what just happened, I guess those lights are the two timelines merging. That makes the most sense.
Federe glanced at her like he hoped she wouldn't ground him for all eternity.
Mom, what's going on? I was just talking to someone and poof, they vanished like they never existed.
Phelan bellowed as she ran out of the fog while waving her hands in the air. Unlike her half-brother, she had long, straight, black hair pulled into two tails, and they stick out from either side of her head. But her blue robe and black trousers were at least made in her time period, unlike Federe's.
Two timelines are merging. We already established that. To keep up.
Fedra turned so his sister couldn't see his grin of triumph since he'd figured out what was going on first. It took Faye a moment to remember merging with a copy of herself. Once she did, the memories of that other version of her slotted into the gaps in her memory, and she turned. Where's Istiana? Where's my sister?
Do we finally get to meet your family? Or are you going to send us away and pretend we don't exist for another 1,000 years?
Phelan folded her arms. What are you talking about? You've met her numerous times. She just didn't want you to know she's the ex-goddess of the past, so we didn't mention she's my sister. We told you she was an old and very dear friend. Faye spun on her heel and scanned the fog for any sign of Istiana. I hope she didn't fade away. Well, I'm not the goddess of the future for nothing. Faye called up a flame on her palm, and she flipped through the immediate futures as she glared at it. She'd find Istiana in one of them. You found me, and I told you what's happening. You should both go home now and look after your siblings.
Why would we do that when you're obviously doing something interesting, and they're not?
Phelan said as sweetly as she could as she batted her eyes.
Except for Fair, who is still little and well looked after by us all, the rest of our siblings are all between 100 and many thousands of years old.
Fedric folded his arms too and stood beside his older sister. Because if you don't go home right now, I'll change your futures. So you're both grounded and can't leave the house until sometime next century or longer. Faye shrugged like she didn't care how long she grounded them for. After all, she loved having her children underfoot.
Oh, fine, we'll go. But if anything else weird happens, we're coming back, and we don't care if you ground us then.
Phelan pulled her robe apart as she shifted into a dragon.
Must you do that where I can see it? I think you blinded me.
Fedri rubbed his eyes.
You'll survive.
Phelan grabbed Fedri's arm and threw him onto her back, and then she flapped her wings and flew away. Kids today, they just don't listen like they used to. Faye shook her head and consulted the future again, through the fireball bobbing on her fist. Where are you, sis?
Chapter 27, Gems and Gates. Come to me, my pretties. The light from above faded as Guerren's shadow fell over the crystals covering the seafloor, and he forgot about the gallons of water on top of him. All that water should crush him, and in the back of his mind a small voice jabbered on about drowning. But he couldn't drown, since he was just a spirit, so Guerren ignored that voice and marveled at the shimmering crystals. All were polished and smoothed as they tumbled around underwater before landing on the seafloor. And they're all mine. Well, maybe not all of them, since his trousers only had 2 pockets, and the crystals covered the seafloor for as far as he could see. There must be millions of them. How can I choose which one to grab with so many to choose from? That was the real problem, not his fear of drowning, but that fear still nibbled on the edges of his mind. Where did all these gems come from? And why has no one else claimed them? Were they cursed? If they're cursed, then I'll give them to somebody else. I don't have to keep them. But he'd keep them, even if they were cursed, because they were too pretty to let go. Guerren stretched out a gauntleted hand and seized as many as he could hold. A few crystals escaped his hand and drifted in the surf, rolling past him. He had to loosen his thigh armor so he could shove the ones he grabbed into his pocket, then repeat the procedure with the pocket on his other side. When his pockets bulged with crystals, he forced himself to look up instead of down. down. How do I get out of here? Just because the water wasn't crushing him now didn't mean it would continue to hold off on doing that. After all, he'd only visited heaven once to attack it, and that didn't go well. I don't remember being incorporeal then either, so this spirit thing is new. That meant it could change at any time. I need to swim now, but I never learned how. Guerren clawed at the water above him, but he didn't lift off the seafloor. Damn! I must be doing something wrong. Panic gripped him, even though he didn't need to breathe in this state. It's just water. I should pass right through it. But he just stood on the crystal-covered bottom of the sea. What am I doing wrong? Sunlight lanced through the water above him in bright beams, and the surface seemed so very far away. Well, he hadn't tried jumping yet, so Guerren bent his knees and surged upward. He kicked and clawed at the water, and the surface neared. I'm doing it! I'm really swimming now! Guerren grinned in triumph and slowly swam towards the sunlight, sparkling on the surface like a beacon in the dark water. After what felt like a small eternity, his head broke through the surface. Behind him, the ship shuddered and shook as the spells that increased its height and width struggled to maintain those extra magically created decks. In front of him, a set of massive gates loomed over him, and they were covered by climbing people. They must be the gates of heaven. I heard they were pearly, but they looked metallic to me. Maybe they looked pearly to the mortals who saw them and returned to talk about it. Here and there, demons squeezed through a gap in the design covering the gates, but the ex-gods and fallen angels just kept climbing. How can the demons get through those spaces? Why can't the others go through them too? A body struck the surface and sprayed water everywhere, followed by an arm. Then another, and another body fell. Some were in pieces. Then a group of bodies fell as a woman in silver armor dropped like a sword, and her booted feet struck heads and shoulders alike, and the force of her fall knocked the people from the gates, sending them flying away from it. Before she hit the sea, her wings snapped out, and the warrior angel shot back up to the top of the gates, where she hovered as she talked to a silhouetted angel holding a hammer. But they didn't talk long before the warrior angel grabbed the other angel, and both shot into the sky. I wonder what that was all about. Guerren shrugged off the question and his curiosity when a blonde woman leaned away from the gates she clung to and shouted a rallying cry.
Climb now, not for glory, not for gold. Climb now, for heaven awaits, and its power is ours for the taking.
Lystra hung by one arm as she punched the blue sky, then swung herself up to grab the next handhold. A cheer went up, and the climbers redoubled their efforts. Those in the water swam like their lives depended on it. When they reached the gates, they swarmed up them too. No, she's leading my army. I need to stop her. Guerren kicked and cupped his hands to scoop the water out of his way as he swam toward where the gates plunged into the sea. It felt like forever passed him by before he could extend his hand and close his fist around the warm metal of those gates. It's a good thing I have strong arms from all those centuries of swinging heavy weapons. Guerren grunted as he swung his other hand up to grasp what felt like a decorative whorl and pull himself out of the sea. The gate's decorative centerpiece, an ornate tangle of metal swoops and whorls that probably combined to create some pleasing design, also created plenty of handholds. Guerren peered through a gap in the design at more dammed seawater that separated the gates from the sandy shore. Angels ran down the beach, some in shining armor, and others just in their blindingly white robes. Some brandished weapons, and others just their fists. They stood in loose ranks that begged for someone to step up and command them. I could lead them. Guerren shoved his hand through the gap, but his fingers struck an invisible barrier that shoved his hand back through the gap. Damn it.
You dared to defy the will of God, your creator. He can forgive that and let bygones be bygones, but you must kneel now and swear you will serve him. There's only one God,
said a bombastic angel with a booming voice a time long ago before he blasted Guerren with his god rod into hell. For a moment, the memories of that day were as clear in his mind as if he were reliving them right now, but they faded when he removed his hand from the gap in the gate's design. I wonder where that angel is now. Guerren reached for the next handhold as the memories of his fall from grace faded from his mind, until the same voice from his memory shouted,
Go back to hell where you belong, because you shall not pass.
Then he didn't wonder anymore about that angel because he hovered over the gates, and he glowed so brightly even Guerren squinted, but he reached for the next handhold and shoved his foot into the next foothold. He didn't have wings, so he couldn't take Azrael on.
You can't stop us all.
Lionestra shouted from somewhere above.
Come and get me. Show me how tough you are after your precious creator abandoned you.
Guerren expected her to leap off the gate and attack Azrael, but she didn't do that. Instead, lightning rained down on the angel, and it bounced off his brilliant aura.
You're not king here. I am,
said the last man Guerren ever thought would challenge an archangel. What the hell are you doing, Dad? Guerren tried to pick him out from the people above him on the gate, but Azrael's insanely bright aura turned everything into a silhouette.
I'm taking back what his kind took from us. Stay out of this,
said Arbus, the former king of the ex-gods. As a silhouette jumped off the gate, bolts of lightning shot from his hands into the sea, and somehow that curved his trajectory, so he slammed into the waiting arms of the archangel. The two struggled, but Guerren couldn't tell if they were trying to break out of the clinch or gain the upper hand. I didn't know you liked to wrestle. Then again, Azrael was far more dramatic than any other angel Guerren ever ran into, and he'd run into a lot of them during that last war. Who should he root for? His deadbeat dad who got off on watching his spawn fight for the crumbs of his attention? Or the archangel who sent him to hell? It was a tough choice, but a flash of gold hair above recalled him to the task at hand. He needed to challenge Lionestra to a duel and beat her to win control of her army. But he needed to catch her first, and she might be near the top by now. That thought energized him like nothing else, and Guerren grabbed hold of the ankles of the creature above him and climbed up his body, then the body of the creature above him. I must catch her. Lionestra pulled herself onto the gate's top, and she whooped with triumph before turning her back on the climbers. She didn't glance down, or she'd have seen he was only a few feet behind her. Now, this is my chance, Guerren grinned as he scrambled over a fallen angel and stood on her shoulders to reach the top. He threw an arm over, then the other, and pulled himself up. A blast of cold air struck his face so hard it nearly flung him off the gate.
You had a choice, and you chose the way of pain,
Azrael said a long time ago, but his words rang in Guerren's ears as he struggled to hold on to the decorative finials along the top of the gate. I embraced that to survive in hell and not lose my mind. Guerren pushed back against the invisible pressure of the ban and threw a leg onto the finial. Since the gates were wider than 4 handspans, the finials were too, so he could get his other leg on there, then slide his torso onto it and just lay there for a moment. Thank whoever created the gates for making them more like a wall that somehow moved to let things pass.
Having some trouble?
Lionestra turned, and her shadow fell over him. Why aren't you having any trouble? Guerren glared at her as the band flattened him against the hot metal.
Because the ban doesn't apply to me.
She shrugged and stretched her arms out to show the wind didn't push her off. Why doesn't it apply to you? You're from hell. Guerren rolled onto his stomach and pushed up to his hands and knees.
That should be obvious, even to you.
Lionestra raised her hands above her head like she was preparing to dive off the other side into the sheltered harbor. Didn't you fight in the last war? Guerren would have scratched his head if he could lift his arm to do it, but the band shoved him hard against the top of the finial.
No, I didn't exist until after it ended.
Lionestra waved as she dove off the other side. Not so fast. Guerren extended his arm and his hand loosely wrapped around her ankle. He banked on her, not feeling that through the metal plates covering the tops of her boots, and he was right. She didn't feel it, but she felt him yank her toward him. Lionestra spun and kicked him in the head. Guerren saw stars for a moment. Then he fell into the water again. I'll get you for that, and I'll take your army. It should be mine. It is mine. Darkness closed in before he hit the water.
Chapter 28. No plan, just power.
Go back to hell where you belong, because you shall not pass.
Azrael shouted as light burst from a man-shaped silhouette hovering over the gates, startling Arginil out of his thoughts about the library of forbidden knowledge.
Well, now we know where Azrael went.
Azariah shook his head as he squinted at the angel in question.
Does he think he can take on an army all on his own?
Atali asked as the ship stopped. I don't know him well enough to say. Arginil shaded his his eyes with his hand as someone shouted a challenge. Lightning shot out of the clear blue sky, but Azrael didn't react when it struck the light surrounding him, so he probably didn't feel it.
Show off.
Azariah turned away to check on the ship. At least that was what Arginil thought he was doing, but he couldn't check because a silhouette leaped off the gates and flew toward Azrael. The duo wrestled as they rolled across the sky.
Should we help him?
Natalie asked. Their hood must have shaded their eyes enough because the Versati kept their hands at their sides.
You think he'd react well to that?
Azariah strode to the center of the deck to a vertical axle and shoved a rod into a hole in its shaft, then turned it. Chains clanged as they played out from somewhere below the deck they stood on. What are you doing? Arginil hesitated. Did Azariah need help? If I ask, would he react any better than Azrael?
I'm just dropping the anchor so the ship stays put.
Azariah didn't look at him. Did he want him to go away and leave him to his work?
Are all angels like Azrael?
The older generations of angels are built differently.
Azariah stopped turning the vertical axle and removed the rod from the hole in its shaft. The anchor must be down.
Why aren't you like that?
Natalie touched Arginil's arm. Daniel, Azariah, and I are from the last generation of angels created before the war. Azrael is from the generation before us. Arginil turned when the light dimmed behind him. Azrael must have dimmed his aura or flown off to fight someone else. Nor was he the only one who disappeared while they talked. The dragons are gone. Arginil ran toward the half-deck at the front of the ship to confirm that, but he stopped when there was just blue water where the two dragons were before. When did they leave?
What happened to the deal we struck with them?
Natalie skidded to a halt beside him.
I guess it's null and void.
Azariah jogged past them and stuck a bar into a hole in the deck near the wheel and moved it back and forth.
What are you doing?
Natalie climbed the steps to the half-deck in the bow.
I'm winching up the harnesses so they don't drag on the seafloor and get damaged. And to answer the question you're about to ask, yes, the dragons can remove them easily. There's a release they can operate with their opposable thumbs in the front of the harness.
Azariah lifted the bar out of the hole and pushed it into another one to operate that winch and retract the second harness. Natalie glanced back at him.
What do we do now? The dragons were our best hope to corral the demons, fallen angels, and ex-gods, and they left us.
Arginil didn't answer the Versati as he strolled toward the side of the ship. Long ago, Azariah told him which was starboard and which was port, but he couldn't tell them apart right now. They both looked the same. He gripped the rail and wondered how far they were from the gates. A half-mile, maybe? He could fly across that in an instant, but he didn't. He let his wings settle on his shoulders like a feathery cloak. Weapons were never his thing, nor was fighting, although he could fight with the best of them and hold his own thanks to the training he received a long time ago. But it felt wrong to bring violence to this place again.
Arginio, are you okay?
Azariah asked from behind him. Was he okay? No, he wasn't. Just being so close to the home he lost thousands of years ago and the angels he missed even more brought up big feelings he didn't have names for yet. But that wouldn't last, because words were his thing. So he tried to put his misgivings into words. Heaven is supposed to be a place of peace and joy. They're spoiling that just because they can. Arginil waved to the creatures swarming the gates like a colony of ants. I won't spoil it. I didn't fight in the last war, and I won't fight in this latest one.
What are you saying?
Azariah stepped up to the rail beside him, and he felt the angel's glowing eyes on him. It took all his willpower not to return that glance. Not until he earned that regard.
Are you going to do what I think you're going to do?
Matali stepped up to the rail on his other side and gently bumped their hip into his side. Arginil nodded because names jumped into his mind as he stared at the climbing creatures. There was no room for any other words right now except the command on his lips. Azariah had never seen him use his gift, not like this. Arginil didn't know if he could have done something like this back then or if it was something he honed over time. Nor did it matter because he was here now with the power to make a difference in a way that wouldn't sully heaven's sparkling shore. So he stared at the creatures on the gate. As names popped into his mind, he called them out and exerted his will on their owners. Harivat, go back to the ship. Leave heaven now. With each name and each command, someone dropped off the gates, hit the water, and swam back to to the ship they sailed here on.
How long will your control last?
Arginil shrugged and shouted more names and the same command. Hopefully it would be long enough to send them back to the gray between. He kept his gaze on the gates and didn't look left for fear of what he'd see. What will Azariah think of me now? Will he still care as much for me now that he knows I can control people for a limited time? That question rattled around in his mind and heart, but there was no time to find out, not until he sent every creature he could see swimming for the other boat, and maybe not even then because he still must control someone so they could move the ship, unless the dragons came back and took over that job. But that was later. Now he called them and commanded them to go, and they went. On it went, name after name, until they blurred together and lost all meaning. Power bled out of him a little more with each one. The fallen angels were the hardest to control, and it took more power to force them to go. Arginil gripped the railing as his strength faded and his power too. His knees buckled, but strong arms wrapped around him, holding him up. Light seeped in, a trickle at first, then more, giving him strength to call more and hold them to his will.
I love you,
Azariah whispered as his arms tightened around him. He fit perfectly between his wings.
What's mine is yours, always and forever share. My light, my strength, my power.
Arginil wanted to argue that he wasn't the angel he was 4,000 years ago. Ez barely knew him now, but Azariah's light flowed into the void where his rapidly depleting gift was and filled it. Each creature he called was a shimmering thread in his hands, and he could hold more now thanks to Azariah. As they rose off the deck, Azariah clung to him and rested his chin on his shoulder, but he wasn't flying them.
Keep doing what you're doing and just ignore me. I saw some creatures leap off the other side of the gates, but you can't see them from down here, so I'm fixing that.
Natalie said as they flapped their wings and lifted them higher above the sea. A roar startled Arginil so much he grasped after the minds he controlled now and just grabbed them before they snapped out of his spell. What was that? Azariah laughed, and so did Natalie. Their exuberance was a balm on his soul.
They didn't abandon us. Look, the dragons are coming.
Where are they? Arginil glanced around for a moment. When he saw them, he laughed too. A dozen dragons sped toward them, in all colors of the rainbow, and an angel stood on the largest dragon's blue head. Is that Layla?
I think it is.
Natalie said at the same time that Azariah asked,
Who is Layla?
Arginil could only shrug in answer because he didn't catch her real name the one time he tried.
I didn't know her well, but she was rather bossy, so how did she convince a dozen dragons to help us send the army packing?
That was the question they all pondered. Hopefully Layla would tell them. She'd reach shouting distance in a few moments at the speed the dragons swam.
You've been listening to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the next part publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.